Here we have a Swart Atomic Junior, Space Tone Atomic Junior. And the complaint, which is a reasonable complaint, but it's not Swart's fault, is that the center keyway locating pin of this 6v6 broke off in shipping. This is a brand new amp just purchased by the owner on my recommendation, and it arrived with that tube pin snapped off, and he said it fell down inside. So I'm going to open it up and fish that out and see if I can super glue that pin back to the tube. If the tube's still working, there's no need to buy a new tube just because a piece of plastic snapped off, and see where we're at. So let me open this up. I'm going to do this one by hand. There are two more hidden screws. And this is not quite long enough. This is two more hidden screws on the side. All right, the second of the hidden screws out. The whole chassis should slide at this point. It does. And I can disconnect the speaker wire here. Though I need to, I'll show you a nice thing here in just a moment. Let me disconnect this and disconnect the reverb. So the reverb is this nice stuff with the metal braid. And I'm going to put a note to myself real quick. Oh, darn it. I'm doing this all kinds of wrong. Forgot to take the screw out that holds the power cable to the cabinet. Well, that's a mistake I won't make on one of these again. Let me put the chassis carefully to the side. And I'm going to get a Sharpie. Actually, no, I'm not going to use a Sharpie. I'm going to use a little bitty bit of blue painter's tape to remind myself which RCA jack goes to the left. That way I didn't leave a mark. The thing I wanted to show you is that while this connects to the speaker jack in the chassis, this is down here accessible through the little vent. That's where the speaker connects. So if you want to use a larger speaker, you disconnect that, and there you go. You just plug your external cable into there. The Weber Signature 8, it's a good sounding little 8, but it is a little 8. So it's not ideal for all sounds. So we can test the amp easily with this and with external speakers. This says 15 watts and 4 ohms. Makes sense to me. Let's put this to the side and take a look at the chassis. Let's see how to remove this. It looks like it's just these two nuts here and these two almost hidden screws here. So it looks like I just have to remove these two little nuts and their associated screws. And this cover just slides off. That's going to slide off with the power cable connected, so I need to be careful doing that. All right, so that buys me some space. Well, indeed, there is that red plug. The center locator just pushed it through, and I will glue that back on the tube base in a little bit with some super glue. In the meantime, you can see that the construction of this is really solid, and crucially, while this thing has a very nice glossy powder coat finish, the powder coat has been removed every place the ground needs to be. So unlike a lot of things I see on the market today, where there's paint everywhere and they're trusting that a screw will just miraculously break through that paint to make ground somewhere, or a toothed washer will, they've verified that they have good grounds, and you don't have to worry about rust with this aluminum. So it doesn't matter that there's exposed areas. The important thing is that while it has that really pretty painted finish, that none of that paint is between ground and where it needs to be. So I'm not going to be doing any exploration of the circuit itself unless there's a problem with it once I power it on. But I wanted to show you guys. I've got a video on one of these Swart's big, the next line up. I don't remember which one it was, the Atomic Space Tone Non-Junior, one of those, and I'll link that in the description of this video. but I'm going to glue that bit of plastic on here and let it set up, and then we'll put it all together and fire it up and see what it sounds like, and then we'll put it all back together and life will be good, right? All right, super glue in a little bit of time, and that's back on. Now this is a 6L6. It's a TAD, Tube Amp Doctor 6L6 WGC STR. That used to mean special tube request. Now it just means a short plate, short bottle 6L6. Now this amp, I looked it up. It says 5 watts, and it says on the website can be used with a 6V6 or a 6L6. In fact, it says shod with 6V6, as in it comes from the factory typically with a 6V6, but this one has a 6L. Now, I'm not sure that there's going to be any benefit to running a 6L6. The output transformer is going to limit how much wattage can come out of this. It won't make it a 12-watt single-ended amp. And I'm curious as to what the actual bias will be. So I'm going to measure this bias resistor, install the 6L6, power it on, and take some measurements and see where this thing is actually biased with a 6L6 and see if we're getting any real benefit to that. And if I don't think it's a good bias for that, I'll try a 6V6. You can do a cathode biased amp that'll work with more than one tube type, but that doesn't mean it's going to sound its best with every tube type. It's going to typically be optimal for one or another. And I suspect this is kind of a marketing thing. Yeah, it'll take a 6L6, but a 6V6 might be happier. Let's find out. All right, with a 6L6, this thing is idling at 15.05 watts with 125 watts coming out of the wall. That means that it's at 50% dissipation, which is really, really cold for cathode bias. Let me turn this off and put a 6V6 in and see where it is. We really want it to be 90 to 110% for cathode bias. Once I'm sure what all the numbers are at different bias points, different tubes rather, then we can compare the sounds. I just want to know what it is we're hearing. While I'm waiting for that tube to cool down, I would like to point out a few things that I think Swart could do a bit differently, a bit better. He has the neutral here going to the power switch. He has the hot going to the fuse holder, but it's going to the outer connector, not the inner connector. That's not as safe, and that's not safety code. Similarly, he has the green wire, the ground wire, going to this ground, which is shared with the HT center tap, and it's the ground of the filter caps, and that's going through this bus wire to an input connection to the chassis. The law is that this safety ground should have its own connection to the chassis, not shared by anything else. And the law is also that the hot must be switched after a fuse. Now, I don't know why so many companies aren't having to have this inspected for sale. In Europe especially, you cannot sell this kind of thing in Europe wired like this. But a lot of companies get around that. Other companies like Suhr, Fender, Marshall, Vox, Friedman, the big boys, they have to have their stuff certified for sale, and that's an inspection process, and you pay X amount to get that certified per model. So if you have 5 models, you can't say I always do it the same. Each model has to go through that certification process before it's allowed to be sold. This really would be very inexpensive to change in production. Just wire the hot to here, and then from here to the power switch, have the fuse, the neutral going straight to one of the primaries. You could even tie it with one of the unused lugs on the rectifier tube, and just have a new chassis ground point somewhere in here, which is not shared by anything else. It wouldn't cost you anything more than, a little bit of different amount of time to wire it, and one other screw and nut and ground lug for the safety ground. It would make this amp, pretty much uncriticizable. Let's see what the figures are with a 6V6 now. All right, with a 6V6, I used a tungstol, the same wall voltage, 120 volts. The 6V6 is biased at 12.44 watts, which is bang on 100%. So the amp is going to operate a 6V6 pretty much perfectly in cathode bias, and it will also safely run a 6L6, but I don't think the 6L6 is going to be the best sounding option. Anyway, let me let this run for a bit, make sure it doesn't have any issues other than what I've already discussed. And then I'll put it all together. We'll get a chance to hear it with each tube type. And you can see if you hear any difference at all. All right, it's all put back together now. Got the 6V6N for initial tests. If you have one of these and you take it apart, please note that these screws and the ones back there are not the same as these screws. These are wood screws. These are more of a sheet metal screw. These have more of a dress washer. This is more of a cup washer. Don't interchange them. You'll mess things up. Anyway, I think what'll be a little bit fair for this will be first, since it's on the bench and has the internal 8-inch speaker, with the 6V6, I'll put the SE8, the small diaphragm condenser, on the other side, picking up the speaker from this, play a little bit, let you get a sense of what it sounds like with the 8-inch speaker. And then because of the way my space is set up, I'm going to run this into an external cab, and then we'll mic that with a Royer, and we'll compare the 6V6 to the 6L6, see if you hear any differences. So let me get this set up. All right, now we're going to try the 6V6 versus the 6L6. We're going through my ET65 loaded shop cab with a Royer R10 hot rod mic about, just about a foot off, so it gets a little bit of the room. And I'll try to play similar things with each tube. We'll start with some cleans and we'll do some dirtier stuff. I'll level match clean to clean and dirty to dirty as necessary, so, just for fidelity, but I'm not going to do anything to favor one tube over the other. I think the output of the amp should be just about the same with each. So here's a basic clean with the 6V6. All right, it's a passive tone circuit, so this is just no tone roll off. So let's stay about here, 9.5. Let's do 7.5 on the volume for these. Let's do about 3.5 on the reverb for the cleans. Well, it's interesting. While the output level doesn't change because it's limited by the transformer, the noise floor does come up because it has more gain overall and it has a very different mid-range response. So there's a little more breakup with the 6L6, which is kind of the opposite of what people would think. You would think it was just a bigger, cleaner sound. It's actually not, because it's going to be saturating. The output level coming out of the 6L6 is going to be a little bit hotter, which is going to kind of saturate the output transformer a little bit. You're going to run into some compression. At the same time, that this tube is biased 50% versus 100%, so it's really in not a great place traditionally for a cathode bias 6L6. If you like the sound, though, that's fine. Kind of reminds me of a Vibrolux, the way that kind of adds a little stuff to everything. Let's go to the bridge humbucker and flip this boost switch. That's kind of cool. This one's got more lower mids emphasis, and the 6L6 has got a little more upper mids emphasis. So I wish there was a way to make the 6L6 bias more ideally. The trouble is the 6L6 draws a lot more current, and the B plus would have to be changed quite a bit. It doesn't hurt the 6L6 to be run at its less than ideal bias and less than ideal impedance mismatch, load for the output transformer. I think this is design-wise the proper choice for this amp, the 6V6. But that 6L6 sounds pretty cool. So whatever rocks your world is appropriate. And of course, you can have both and go back and forth, as I've done here. Just as you saw with me using this, they get hot. So don't have one on for a while and reach in there and grab it with your fingers, or your fingers will stick to the glass and you will be in a world of hurt. Anyway, this is a really well-built amp. It sounds cool. I'm not a big fan of the 8-inch speaker because it sounds like an 8-inch speaker. They do that. It gets very unpleasant at higher gain stuff. It's one of the reasons it's nice that they gave you this plug here where you can hook up something else. But for the clean stuff, the 8-inch is fine. And, that ratty, about to die distortion is going to make some people really, really smile and could always be an appropriate choice for other genres or other flavors to have on tap. So I think we're going to wrap up our time here with this Swart Space Tone Atomic Jr. And I'll get this back to the owner, who should be very, very happy. And we'll move on to some super reverbs. Thanks for watching.